The yoke of the Squeam was cast off. Humans were free again, able to exploit themselves and their own resources as they saw fit. Not only that, the Squeam Occupation had left humans with a legacy of high technology. The lost human colonies on the nearby stars were contacted and revitalized, and a new explosive wave of expansion began. Powered by hyperdrive, humans spread like an infection across the galaxy. Vigorous, optimistic once more. And everywhere, they encountered the footprints of the Zeli. Hi guys, it's Quinn here. With AI content on the rise, YouTube is recommending human narrators less and less. If you appreciate my content, consider hitting the like button and subscribing. Thanks so much, guys. The Xeelee Sequence follows the story of humanity, from the relatively near future to the end of the universe. It traces the rise and fall of mankind on a cosmic scale, encounters with alien civilizations, and conflicts that stretch across millennia and vast distances. The journey starts with humanity's early steps into interstellar space and continues to the distant fading of the universe. Era of Expansion, 3000 AD through 4874. In the third millennium AD, humanity entered a golden age of renewal and exploration. Earth itself was healed after the ravages of prior centuries. Grand geoengineering projects and nanotechnology had stabilized the planet's fragile ecosystem, re-greening the world with more woodlands than seen since the last ice age. Extinct species were resurrected from genetic archives, and the scars of industry were repaired. It was, as one observer later noted, the morning of mankind, a time of confidence and even arrogance in our destiny. With Earth secure, attention turned skyward. By 3000 AD, the solar system lay open before human ingenuity. During this millennium, advances in physics gave birth to the Grand Unified Theory Drive and transversable wormholes, allowing nearly instantaneous travel across planetary distances. In 3621 AD, Michael Poole himself was born, destined to play a key role in this era of innovation. Michael Poole pioneered the expansion of microscopic wormholes into stable Poole interfaces, which were towed across the system to create a network of portals. Trips that once took months by rocket could now be made in hours. And the Jovian moons became the hub of this new interplanetary highway. Due to these advancements, humanity's boldness only grew. Port Sol, a distant Kuiper Belt outpost at the edge of the Sun's domain, was established as the staging point for the first great interstellar voyages. The stars were calling, and finally humanity was ready to answer. In the late 3600s, humans pushed beyond the solar system's confines and encountered wonders and mysteries that tested our hubris. In 3672 AD, explorers even discovered life in extreme environments previously thought impossible, such as entities who lived for only 3 days before shedding their intelligence and consolidating. Such revelations proved that the galaxy teemed with the unexpected. By 3717 AD, the first true starship, the gut drive ship Cauchy, was launched, carrying a wormhole toward the center of the galaxy on a relativistic mission that was set to return 1500 years later. During this time, human colonies and research outposts continued to spread outward. Each of humanity's successes during this time period added to its confidence, and also to an unspoken sense of invulnerability. But that illusion would be shattered in 3829 AD by a crisis that few could have imagined at the time. Without warning, a wormhole opened in our solar system, a tunnel through time, and through it poured an invasion force from the future. An alien species called the Cax, originating thousands of years hence, attempted a time travel assault on 38th century humanity. This was our first brief encounter with the Cax, long before they would properly arrive in our era, and it nearly brought the expansion to an abrupt end. Only the heroism of individuals like Michael Poole and his colleagues prevented catastrophe. The invaders from the far future were defeated, but the message was clear. Humanity was no longer alone, and not every intelligence among the stars would be friendly. Caution now tempered human arrogance. In 3953 AD, the starship Great Northern was launched on a deep space voyage to explore the distant future and to search for Michael Poole, who had vanished after defeating the Cax. Powered by the gut drive, this vessel set out toward the galactic frontier. Though only hundreds of years would pass relative to the crew of the vessel, the Great Northern's journey would ultimately span millions of years, its fate intertwined with the far future. For now, though, humanity was focused on its flourishing colonies and the promise of the open galaxy. The expansion era had been a time of hope and limitless possibility for mankind, but it was about to meet its first great challenge from the dark of interstellar space. The Squeam Occupation, 4874 AD through 4925. The first contact with a non-temporally displaced, intelligent alien species came not through peaceful exchange, but through conquest. Late in the 49th century, Squeam ships burst into the solar system without warning. The Squeam were an aquatic, group-mind species, colonial organisms who traveled as united schools. They arrived amid a shower of exotic particles and lurid publicity, initially feigning friendship. Communication with the newcomers was difficult. The Squeam had an utterly alien mindset. They didn't even have a concept of counting. But eventually common ground was established. Humanity was eager, perhaps too eager, to welcome our first interstellar allies. We learned that the Squeam possessed a form of faster-than-light hyperdrive beyond our understanding, and maintained a network of trading colonies among the stars. They seemed amicable enough, and soon trade and cultural exchanges began. But the Squeam's benign mask, of course, hid a calculated purpose. In 4874 AD, without a declaration of war, the Squeam sprung their trap. In orbit around every inhabited planet of the solar system, Squeam hyperdrive cannon platforms suddenly appeared, bristling with weapons trained on Earth and the colonies. The Squeam seized control of humanity's worlds immediately. Thus began the first occupation of humankind. All at once, the age of expansion gave way to subjugation. Human freedom of movement was brutally revoked. Human space travel was suspended. Wherever the great gut ship freighters landed, they were being broken up. The Poole wormhole fast transit routes were collapsed. The vast transport infrastructure that Michael Poole had built was systematically dismantled by the Squeam. In the span of days, mankind's hard-won interplanetary empire was paralyzed. On Earth and the colonies, the Squeam imposed strict laws and forced labor. Humans were put to work on Squeam projects, treated as a servile population. Any thought of resistance was swiftly snuffed out. Our defenses were no match for Squeam technology. Resistance imploded quickly under the shock and awe of the invaders' arrival. There were, however, a few independent-minded souls who refused to submit. Mostly pilots and spacers who were caught between the worlds when the occupation began. People like Anna Gage, a gut ship captain from the outer system, took their ships and fled rather than surrender. These free agents became the seed of an underground resistance in the fringes of the solar system, hiding in remote asteroids and ice dwarfs. For most of humanity, though, the late 4900s were the years of silent desperation under alien rule. The Squeam occupation, while harsh, would mercifully be brief. Humans proved far more difficult than the Squeam anticipated, and our oppressed populace yearned to strike back. In 4922 AD, a pivotal incident fanned the flames of revolt. This is depicted in the short story The Xeelee Flower. In the story, a tiny but incredibly resilient alien artifact, the so-called Xeelee Flower, was discovered, and this would eventually be used by mankind against the Squeam. By 4925 AD, Open rebellion exploded across the solar system, and the Squeam were overthrown. Humanity cast off its first alien oppressor in less than 5 decades from the invasion. The first occupation of Earth had ended. Scars remained. Much of humanity's infrastructure had been destroyed, but humanity learned a vital lesson and hardened its resolve. Never again, people vowed, would we be caught so unprepared. In the aftermath, around 5000 AD, a second expansion began. With renewed determination, humankind rebuilt its fleets, reopened its wormholes, and once more pushed out to reclaim lost ground among the stars. This time, however, we expanded with our eyes watchful for the next threat looming in the darkness, and we did not have long to wait. The CCS Occupation, 5088 AD through 5407. As the 51st century dawned, humans were spreading outward again, colonizing new systems and encountering other starfaring species. Trade and diplomacy flourished in the Milky Way galaxy. But in 5088 AD, humanity faced a second great subjugation, one far more brutal than the Squeam had been. We came into contact with the CCS. The CCS were unlike the Squeam. They were not a single collective mind, but a sparse species of alien entities, few in number, but possessed of advanced technology. Ironically, the CCS were not naturally warlike. Being so few, they valued each of their lives too much to favor open combat. In fact, they were instinctive traders and entrepreneurs, competing like efficient corporations in a galaxy of squabbling junior races, bound by economics. But the CCS had one quality that made them extraordinarily dangerous: cold opportunism. They enslaved mankind simply because it was an economically valid proposition, because they could. Where the Squeam conquered through deceit, the CCS conquest was blunt force. They descended on human space and occupied Earth with little resistance, almost as an afterthought. To the CCS, the rich worlds of humankind were ripe plums ready for the picking, and human history itself provided a manual for domination. Lacking an instinct for cruelty, the CCS studied our own legacy of colonialism and tyranny to learn the techniques of oppression. Human history wasn't short of object lessons. Armed with this grim knowledge, the CCS imposed a reign of terror that surpassed the Squeam in its thoroughness. The second occupation had begun. Under CCS rule, Earth and its colonies endured 3 centuries of systematic subjugation. The CCS brought with them bizarre living ships known as splines, mile-wide organisms engineered as starships. A single spline could cause immense devastation. One by one, the last symbols of human autonomy were dismantled. In a symbolic moment, the final human-built spacecraft, the pride of our fleet, was torn apart in Breaker's Yard as the occupying CCS looked on. After centuries of exploration, humanity was grounded. The only way to travel beyond Earth now was as a prisoner in the belly of the CCS spline. The CCS even shut down Pool's wormholes, determined to prevent any chance of organized revolt. Life under the CCS was a study in humiliation and despair. Yet even in this dark time, seeds of hope survived. Some humans collaborated just enough to gain the knowledge of the CCS, while others fomented quiet rebellion. The occupation lasted uninterrupted until the mid-53rd century. Then events unfolded that the CCS did not anticipate: the return of the gut ship Cauchy. As mentioned, in 3717 AD, the Cauchy left on a relativistic voyage towards the center of the galaxy. During this time, 5274 AD, 1500 years later, it reappeared in the solar system, bringing with it a wormhole link from the past. Using this wormhole link, a human vessel from Earth escaped into the past, and the CCS would eventually follow, culminating in the events of 3829. This loop would eventually close in humanity's favor. In 5406 AD, the final uprising against the CCS began, with pilot Jim Boulder playing a significant role. Through his actions, the CCS homeworld would ultimately be destroyed, leading to a feud which would last until the end of time. By 5407 AD, the CCS occupation was overthrown. Humanity rose up and expelled the CCS. In their defeat, the CCS left behind some of their powerful technologies. Humans captured fleets of spline ships and even acquired the fearsome Starbreaker weaponry that had been used to cow our worlds. At long last, Earth was free, and now armed with tools of tremendous power. Chastened by 2 eras of servitude, humanity's temperament had changed. We were no longer naive players on the galactic stage. By 5500 AD, a third expansion was underway, but it was an expansion with an edge. Humans now wielded the Caxus biomechanical ships, and with the Starbreaker, a device capable of making stars explode, we held a weapon of terrible deterrence. Our civilization had been tempered in the fires of oppression, emerging harder and fiercer. The galaxy would never again take humankind lightly. Assimilation, 10,000 AD through 100,000 AD. After the fall of the Cax, humanity vaulted into an era of explosive growth and domination. Thousands of years passed, and by around 10,000 AD, our species had not only recovered its former reach, but far exceeded it. A wavefront of human colonization spread at light speed across the galaxy, and the ever-advancing sphere of exploration and settlement. Hardened by past subjugation, humans vowed never to be victims again. Instead, we became the conquerors. Never again would humanity be made to serve at the behest of some alien power. As humans grew in power, the conquest of other species became an industry. In this assimilation era, mankind aggressively absorbed other intelligent races into our expanding sphere. Dozens, then hundreds of alien cultures were encountered, and one by one they were assimilated, their territories, knowledge, and technologies folded into human dominion. By the year 10,000, humanity was the undisputed master of the galaxy's junior races, second in status only to the Xeelee themselves. It was a time of triumph and hubris for Homo sapiens. Our empire spanned spiral arms. We commanded fleets of living ships and wielded weapons that could shatter worlds. With our expansion unchecked by any external force, we turned our efforts to unlocking the universe's deepest secrets. Humans ventured into the ancient corners of the galaxy that had been untouched for eons. In the year 10515 AD, for example, explorers reached a lonely dwarf star on the galactic edge and found it encircled by a giant crystal lattice artifact. An object we dubbed the Snowflake. This mysterious megastructure had been orbiting that star for 14 billion years, predating even the Zeli. Confronted with such awe-inspiring relics, humanity realized there were powers and histories far older than our own. We eagerly studied these findings, assimilating not just species, but also the knowledge of bygone civilizations. Most mysterious of all were, of course, the Zeli, the godlike architects of the universe's mightiest structures. The Zeli still largely ignored us, absorbed in their unfathomable agenda. But humanity's astronomers and historians began to piece together clues. Evidence emerged that the Zeli were undertaking a grand project that transcended ordinary space and time. In 2124 AD, human scientists finally unraveled part of this riddle while studying peculiar cube-shaped worlds left behind by the Zeli. What they discovered was staggering. The cube worlds were antiparticles, moving back through time to initiate their own creation. The whole of Xeelee history was a single vast vacuum diagram, closed and complete of itself. In other words, the Xeelee had engineered a closed time-like loop, a circular timeline in which they were their own cause and effect. Humanity now understood to an extent that the Xeelee were not just fighting for the present or future, but actively intervening in the deep past to secure their dominance. This revelation would only heighten mankind's determination to challenge the Xeelee, even as it humbled us with the knowledge that our universe was far stranger than we imagined. By 100,000 AD, humanity's expansion and assimilation of others had peaked. Our empire spanned the galaxy, and all lesser civilizations had been absorbed or subordinated. With no external enemies left to conquer, humanity turned its gaze to the final obstacle: the Xeelee themselves. The simmering resentment and fear of the Xeelee's power, long held in check, now ignited into open ambition. We were the rulers of the Milky Way, and yet the Xeelee still treated us as inconsequential. The time had come, humanity believed, to claim its place at the top of creation, and so humanity prepared for the ultimate war. The war to dethrone the Xeelee and assert control over the cosmos itself. The war to end wars. 100,000 AD through 1 million. With humanity at the height of its power, the stage was set for the greatest conflict in human history. Around 100,000 AD, human forces launched their first assault on Xeelee concentrations. Thus began the war to end all wars, a final desperate struggle between mankind and the ancient Xeelee. This was no single battle or campaign, but a sustained conflict that would rage for hundreds of thousands of years. The scale of the war defied comprehension. Humanity marshaled fleets of unprecedented size, deployed planet-sized warships, and exotic weapons gleaned from a dozen conquered species. The Xeelee, masters of space-time, responded with forces and technologies at the very limits of physical law. The battleground was the galaxy itself. Early in the war, humans scored a few astonishing successes, born of sheer audacity. In one incident, a task force of human ships pursued a retreating Xeelee craft to a peculiar artifact known as Boulder's Ring, a vast ring-shaped portal in space. Unbeknownst to the pursuers, this ring was a doorway to another universe. A human warship, engines burning at full thrust, plunged through the ring and disappeared, only to find itself in an utterly alien cosmos. Within this separate universe, the laws of physics were wildly different. Gravity was 1 billion times stronger than our own universe. The ship imploded under the immense pull, its hull buckling, yet miraculously, the crew survived. In time, those castaway humans adapted to the hypergravity environment and built a fragile new society there, effectively founding a human colony in another universe. This is depicted in Stephen Baxter's book, Raft. These events were merely a fragment of the larger war, but it showed the lengths to which mankind would go. Humans had literally chased the Xeelee out of the universe, and some of us had paid the price, becoming exiles beyond reality. Back in our own universe, the war, however, intensified. The Xeelee proved to be nigh impossible to dislodge. Their defenses around key regions of the galaxy were ferocious. Humanity poured resources into the conflict on an unimaginable scale. Entire star systems were harnessed to build armadas. In 168-349 AD, for instance, the exaltation of the Integrality, a colossal battle fleet, was launched as a part of the war effort. Heroes and legends emerged. The short stories The Tyranny of Heaven and Hero tell of the individuals who grappled with the moral cost of this war and the sacrifices made in humanity's name. Despite occasional victories, however, it became clear that the Xeelee were staggeringly resourceful and enduring. The war dragged on for millennia, with humanity refusing to relent. Every time the Xeelee were pushed back, they rebounded with new strategies from the cutting edge of physics. They could manipulate space-time, weaponize singularities, and deploy constructs the size of solar systems. The dream that humanity might triumph outright over such beings began to fade. By the late 900,000s, the conflict had decimated much of the Milky Way galaxy. Stars had been snuffed out in pitched battles. Entire civilizations and many subjugated alien species allied under humanity were collateral casualties. Yet the Xeelee still held the upper hand. In the final centuries of the war, they gradually corralled the remaining human forces back toward our home system. In 1 million AD, the long fight reached a climactic endgame. The Xeelee launched a final siege of the solar system. Countless Xeelee ships, sleek, dark, and impossibly fast, descended upon humanity's last stronghold. Earth's skies filled with lethal light as starbreaker beams and exotic weapons rained down. The defenders fought with courage and desperation, but the outcome was never in doubt. After eons of war, humanity was utterly defeated. However, in this final battle, the Xeelee did not seek to exterminate humankind. Instead, they enacted a more calculated punishment. The surviving humans were rounded up and imprisoned, removed from the galactic stage entirely. The war that had begun as humanity's bid for supremacy ended with our species in chains, our grand fleets reduced to wreckage, and our pride humbled for eons to come. Mankind's age of dominion was over. The Xeelee, in their inscrutable way, crafted prison habitats in which to contain the remnant of humanity. Earth was sealed off in what was called the Shell, a vast curved wall encasing a pocket of habitable land like a cosmic snow globe. Inside, some of the last generations of humans lived out their days under an artificial sky, cut off from the stars. The Xeelee had thus neatly removed the human threat without committing genocide. They turned the Earth into a cosmic reservation, leaving our once great species to dwindle in captivity. The war to end wars was over, and humankind had lost. Flight of the Xeelee, 1 million AD through 4 million. Having vanquished humanity, the Xeelee now turned their full attention to the far greater enemy that had haunted them for 20 billion years, an enemy not of flesh and blood, but of dark matter itself. Throughout the eons, parallel to humanity's relatively insignificant drama, the Xeelee had been waging a cosmic war against the Fotino Birds. These Fotino Birds were invisible dark matter creatures who lived within stars. Over billions of years, they were slowly poisoning the stars, making them die prematurely by draining their heat from within. The Xeelee, as the guardians of baryonic life, had fought to preserve the light of the stars against this encroaching darkness. By the time of humanity's defeat, the Fotino Birds were on the verge of victory in that ancient conflict. The galaxy's stars were dimming, one by one. Suns were sputtering out due to Fotino influence. Even Sol, the sun of Earth, began to swell and redden, leaving its main sequence far ahead of schedule. The universe was aging unnaturally fast. The Xeelee recognized that if they stayed in this universe, they were doomed to perish alongside every other luminous species. And so, they enacted the penultimate stage of their grand plan. In the real world, the Great Attractor is an anomaly, around 150 to 250 million light years away from Earth. It influences the motion of galaxies, including our own local group, which is moving toward it right now at over 600 kilometers a second. Baxter explains this real-world anomaly in his series as the site of the Great Xeelee Ring. It was a construction of mind-boggling scale, no less than 10 million light-years across. It was a gateway that exploited the fabric of space-time itself. It was nothing less than an escape hatch from the universe. They began constructing it 5 billion years before life began on Earth. In the aftermath of the war with humanity, around 1 million AD, the Xeelee set the ring to its ultimate purpose. Over the next 3 million years, the Xeelee systematically evacuated our universe through this portal. Fleet after fleet of Xeelee ships, night dark vessels, countless in number, streamed steadily through Boulder's Ring and disappeared into the extra-dimensional beyond. The migration took eons of sustained effort. Enormous freighters the size of moons patrolled the ring, using crimson starbreaker beams to swat away any remaining threats, such as asteroids or stray stars, that might drift into the portal's vicinity. From across the galaxy, Xeelee forces withdrew to make this final exodus. Other species watching from afar saw a spectacle of unparalleled grandeur. Like a river of darkness, the Xeelee flowed out of the Milky Way. By roughly 4 million AD, the great exodus was complete. The ring now sparkled empty and silent, like a jewel in a nest of stars, with the Xeelee now gone. In their wake, they left behind an almost ghostly quiet universe. Ages of conflict were over. The galaxy was largely empty of its most advanced beings. But the Xeelee's final act was yet to come. Their grandest engineering project, a fitting coda to their supremacy. Having escaped the Fotino Birds by leaving the universe, the Xeelee executed a plan to save the universe's future in their own fashion. The secret lay in those mysterious time-spanning seed ships that humans had caught hints of. As the last Xeelee passed through the ring, a supreme entity, the anti-Xeelee, took action. This being can be thought of as the collective will or avatar of the Xeelee's grand project. It oversaw an array of millions of seed pods, cube-shaped vessels as large as worlds that had been carefully prepared. These pods contained the essence of Xeelee civilization. Unborn Xeelee entities, ships with folded wings and distilled knowledge. Refined reflections of the anti-Xeelee itself. When all was ready, in an instant, the seed pods vanished from the universe. The Xeelee had launched their civilization back in time. The pods hurled themselves into the deep past, set to emerge only 100,000 years after the Big Bang, at the moment the newborn universe first became transparent to light. In that era, matter and radiation decoupled in a primeval flash, the cosmic microwave background, and space filled with light for the first time. There, in that early dawn, the pods would open, and the Xeelee would unfold into being at the very beginning of time. They would effectively preempt the Fotino Birds, ensuring that from the start, the Xeelee were present to wage the war for the stars. In doing so, the Xeelee created a causal loop. The Xeelee of the far future went back and became the Xeelee of the far past. Eventually, the project would lead to the development of the seed pods, the spawning of the anti-Xeelee itself, and so the circle would be closed. There was no paradox. The Xeelee had always been there, and always would be. This was the final secret history of the Xeelee, a perfect temporal Ouroboros, a universe-spanning lifeboat that saved their species from extinction by rewriting their origin. As the last pod slipped away, the Great Ring's purpose was fulfilled. The Xeelee had escaped the doomed universe and simultaneously won their war in the most absolute way, by denying the Fotino Birds any chance to extinguish them. With all of its work now done, the anti-Xeelee dissipated, its consciousness spreading out and fading like a final sigh of relief. The Xeelee left our universe, empty-handed but undefeated, leaving behind a cosmos inexorably falling into darkness. Fotino Victory, 4 million AD through 10 million. The Xeelee's departure marked the end of one era and the beginning of another, the era of the Fotino Birds' total victory. After 4 million AD, with the Xeelee gone, no force remained that could challenge the Fotino Birds' slow annihilation of the stars. The Great Ring, last hope of baryonic life, now hung unattended, a gleaming loop in space. In 4,101,266, an event signaled the changing of the cosmic guard. Some of the last remnants of humanity lived inside the constructed habitat known as the Shell, isolated from the wider universe. A man named Teal was the first to discover the 8 rooms and be noticed by the disembodied consciousness of Michael Poole and Paul. Years later, after Teal's death, his former wife, a woman named Erwal, leads an expedition away from her collapsing village to the 8 rooms that her former husband Teal once believed was the solution to saving them all. Enduring extreme cold and loss, Erwal and a group of villagers eventually find the 8 rooms, a mysterious, warm, floating building. With her persistence and guidance from waking visions sent by an unknown friend, Erwal learns how to interact with the strange technology there, ultimately discovering and activating a dormant Xeelee ship designed for human use. As Errol and a group of survivors begin to unlock the ship's systems, she receives further assistance from the friend, later revealed to be Paul, a quantum remnant of a long-dead human created and abandoned by the Xeelee. Paul guides her through the visions, helping her learn to control the ship, access healing systems, and eventually pilot it. Meanwhile, Paul manipulates two ancient cosmic forces, the Cax, who want to destroy the final remnants of humanity, and the Fotino Birds, who are collapsing the universe's last gateway, the Ring. By tricking both races into believing that the Xeelee are returning, Paul forces them into a conflict, thereby clearing a brief path for Errol's group to escape. Errol, trusting the friend and driven by instinct, guides the ship through hyperspace. Eventually they reach the Ring. As the gateway begins to collapse under the Fotino Birds' attack, Errol's ship dives through the singularity at the Ring's center. Paul, his mission complete, stays behind as the Ring is destroyed, and the original universe is sealed forever. In the new universe, younger and untouched by entropy, the semi-sentient Xeelee ship constructs a habitable Earth-like world for the passengers. Using their DNA, it grows ecosystems and creates an environment where they can survive. Errol and her people emerge into this fresh, warm world, alone, but with hope. At least one other remarkable group of humans still roamed free in the old cosmos, however. The crew of the gut ship Great Northern. This vessel, as we mentioned earlier, was launched back in 3953. And it had been traveling at a relativistic speed on an extended mission. Due to time dilation, its crew experienced only a few years, while millions of years passed outside. When the Great Northern finally decelerated and returned to the solar system around 5 million AD, its crew found a very different cosmos. They were essentially the last free humans, arriving to witness the twilight of the universe. Stranded in this distant future, after their wormhole is destroyed, the crew of the Great Northern seeks a way to escape the dying universe. They eventually learn of the Great Attractor, the Xeelee Ring. With assistance from the disembodied mind of Michael Poole and a Xeelee Night Fighter, they navigate through the fragmented cosmic strings to reach the Ring in a time before it was destroyed. The Xeelee allow the last humans to pass through the Ring. They arrive in a new universe, less than 1 billion years old. As the calendar advances toward 10 million AD, the extinction of baryonic life was nearly complete. Star by star, galaxy by galaxy, the Fotino Birds ensured that the lights went out. Without fusion to sustain them, stars cooled and dimmed into cinders much earlier than their natural lifespans. The universe grew darker and colder with each passing millennium. The once thriving empire of humanity had flickered out long ago. Now even the simplest life struggled to survive. By this epoch, virtually no intelligent life remained in normal matter form. The Milky Way was a graveyard of dark, uninhabitable systems. The Fotino Birds reigned supreme in the deep, invisible gravity wells where they dwelled, unchallenged at last. And yet, life and consciousness had not completely vanished. A few last sentient beings persisted in unusual ways. Among them was Paul, the disembodied mind of what had once been a man. Over the unimaginable ages, he wandered the dying galaxies, witnessing the end of all things, including the final end of baryonic life. By about 500 million years after the Xeelee's exodus, even Paul had found that measurement of time became meaningless. All the stars had burnt out, no hydrogen remained to fuel them, and the cosmos was pitch black. The universe by now had expanded and aged to over 100 times the age it was when the Xeelee left. Galaxies themselves were evaporating, their remnants falling into massive black holes. In this lightless era, Paul drifted on, an almost solitary witness to the death of the universe. Incredibly, Paul was not entirely alone. Somewhere, the disembodied consciousness of Michael Poole still remained to witness the death of the universe. And also, in the absolute darkness between the stars, there was another presence. It was the last of the Cax, one final member of the once mighty occupiers of Earth, now reduced to a lonely immortal wanderer like Paul. Human and Cax, these last two lingering minds found each other near the faint glow of the last surviving proton star, the husk of a neutron star that still emitted a trickle of warmth from the residual particle decay. They huddled together around this final ember of the cosmos, much as ancient people might huddle around a waning campfire on a cold night. The Cax and the human did not speak. After all that had transpired, there was nothing left to say. In the silent communion of these last two beings, once enemies, now simply survivors at the end of time, there was a kind of profound peace. They kept a quiet vigil as the very fabric of the universe unraveled. One by one, the great black holes that had devoured galaxies began to evaporate via Hawking radiation. The long night of the cosmos deepened, and even protons, the building blocks of atoms, began to decay away into nothingness. The river of time flowed, unmarked, towards the endless seas of time-like infinity. All events, all stories, even the mighty Zeli and the Fotino Birds had receded into the darkness. In that final moment, perhaps a singularity was reached, a boundary beyond which there is no after. The tale of our universe ended, fading into black. Paul, the last human mind, let go of his final thoughts. The Cax fell silent. The timeline of the Xeelee Sequence, a saga on a cosmic scale, comes to close here. The stage of the universe grows empty and still. Night falls forever. Thank you guys so much for watching. For more videos on the Xeelee Sequence and videos on other science fiction books, please check out my channel. Also, please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed the content. More videos about the Xeelee Sequence are definitely coming on this channel in the future because there are several mysteries in these books that I think are still worth exploring, and one of those mysteries is whether or not Michael Poole and Paul are in fact the same entity, or what is their relationship. What I can tell you is that Paul's ending in vacuum diagrams is written almost identically to Michael Poole's ending in Ring. And I can also tell you that the end of Time Like Infinity, where history starts again, is actually observed by Paul in vacuum diagrams, but by Michael in the book Time Like Infinity. Now, there are several explanations as to why this could be the case that I can think of right now, but I'm going to save those explanations for future topics in future videos, so stay tuned. Thank you so much.